My name is Pepe, and I'm a drug addict. First of all, I want to say that this is a privilege for me, to be asked to come here and share a little bit of what I have to offer. I believe very strongly in what the fellowship has to say when it says you can only keep what you have by giving it away. And God knows I don't ever want to lose what I have. It's true, I got here for the first time in 1959. NA was 5 years old at the time. And the first meeting I went to, there were about 7 or 8 people. And at that time, that was the entire NA group in the world. And I'll never forget that day. It was in Southern California, in a little place called Studio City. And during that time, they used to hold the Narcotics Anonymous meetings in a little sanitarium, and it was called Sharer's Sanitarium. And we used to call it Sharer's Dryer because that's where the alcoholics used to go dry up. And in the back room, they used to let the Narcotics Anonymous group hold their meetings. And that's where I went for my first meeting. The way I got to this fellowship was I ended up in a hospital behind an overdose. And during the time that I was there in the hospital, I met the man who later became my sponsor, and he's the guy that came in and talked to me about the program. And he's the guy that not only did he take me to my first meeting, but the guy took me out of the hospital and took me to live with him. And this was the first time I had ever experienced anything like this. I had never heard about any programs. I had never been associated with any programs. And the only program I had any experience with was a program in Fort Worth, Texas, and one in Lexington, Kentucky. At that time, that were the only places that they would send drug addicts. There were no recovery houses. There were no treatment. In fact, if a doctor treated you for drug addiction and didn't turn you into the authorities, he could lose his license. At that time, drug addicts were not very welcome. And I went to my first meeting there in Studio City, and I'll remember that day. If I lived to be 1,000 years old, they used to have it on a Friday night, and I got out of the hospital on Tuesday, and during that time I went to some Alcoholics Anonymous meetings because that's all there was. And the Alcoholics Anonymous group at that time welcomed the drug addicts because they knew we had no place to go. And when I went to my first meeting, we drove up on the side street of the little sanitarium, and right next to the sanitarium, there was a little complex. It was sort of like some bungalows back there. And when we drove up, we saw that there was an ambulance back there, and there were some police cars. We could see the lights flashing, and we could hear the radio calls. And we wondered, gee, I wonder what's happening next door. And when we went into the meeting, we found out that one of the members of the Narcotics Anonymous group there, who lived next door, had committed suicide. And I had met this guy a couple of days before, and his name was Grant Withers. And at one time, this guy had everything going for him. He had a beautiful career. He was a movie actor. He was a very close friend of John Wayne. And at one time, this guy was married to one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood, an actress named Loretta Young. And like I said, he had everything going for him, a beautiful home in Hollywood, a lot of nice people that he associated with, money. He had everything going for him. And when I met this man, he was living next door to this little sanitarium in this little bungalow. And he couldn't stay clean. When I went into the meeting, the founder of this fellowship, a man named Jimmy Cannon, was reading a little letter that this man had left. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but the contents of the letter was that he was tired. He couldn't find a way out. He seemed to be in a black hole, and he couldn't get out. And he decided that the only way he would find any peace was to take his life. And the rest of that night, everybody turned that meeting into sort of a gratitude meeting. Everybody was talking about how grateful they were that they were clean. Some of them had their families back. Some of them were working again. You know. And the whole meeting was sort of, like I said, like a gratitude meeting. Everybody was grateful for something. And I sat there, and I listened to these people, and I couldn't identify with these people. The guy I felt close to, the guy I really felt close to, was the dead man. Because that's how I felt. See, I had never been able to stay clean on the streets. I got busted for my first possession in 1947, when I was just a young boy. And from 1947 until 1962, when I came to stay in this fellowship, I spent about 70% of that time locked in an institution for drugs. I had never been able to stay on the streets. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to be able to stay clean and sober. I was frightened. I didn't know what was going to happen. And like I said, I had been out of the hospital for several days. You know, and the last habit I kicked was a methadone habit. You know, and in those days, they didn't call it methadone. They call it dolphin. And in those days, they didn't know how to withdraw you from methadone. They didn't know that the way you take you down from methadone is with methadone. They just cut your dosage little by little. And if you have a bad habit, it could take between a month and 2 months to get you down. And what they did with me when I went to the hospital, they stopped my methadone. And they gave me something for the nausea, and they gave me something for the pain, and they gave me something for all these symptoms that I had, and I almost died. It was the worst habit I ever had. And I was in an intensive unit for 3 weeks. I had tubes in me, and I was pretty close to gone. And so when I got out of the hospital, which was about a month after I had stopped using methadone, I had been out of the hospital for several days, and by that time all the medication that I was taking had wore off, and I started getting sick again. I didn't know it took that long to kick a methadone habit. And I hadn't slept the night before. I was beginning to hallucinate. I was hearing voices that weren't there. I was seeing things that weren't there. And this is how I went to my first meeting. I was awfully sick. I was awfully frightened. And I couldn't identify with these people that were grateful. And after that meeting, I went back to this little hotel that I had. And while I was in the hotel, I really got into these hallucinations. And I felt that there was something very, very evil was going to get me. And I wanted to leave that room. But I was afraid to go out in the dark because I sort of felt like if I go out in the dark, whatever that evil thing is, it's going to get me. So what I did is I went and I sat in the corner and I put a blanket over my shoulders and I sat down in the corner to make sure that nobody could get behind me. And I sat there scared to death all night. And as soon as the sun began to come up, I left that room, I got on a bus, and I went to East Los Angeles and I got well.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Carol C., who her brother had the seizure, they're waiting for you in the ambulance. They want you to go with him. Carol C. from Staten Island, please go outside to the ambulance. They want you to go with him to the hospital. I'm sorry.
That was the only thing I knew what to do, was to get well. You know, and it was right after that I started using again. And it was about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. I really don't remember how long it was. Half drunk and all full of drugs. I walked into the federal building there on the corner of Temple Street and Main Street in Los Angeles, and I turned myself in. See, 19 months before that, I had been paroled off of a federal institution in Texas. And I had been running for 19 months. When I left that institution, I used that day when I got out. And like every time before, I ran from the gate. I never reported to the man. And I have been using ever since. And this was the first time in my life that I had ever turned myself in. And then I thought about what had happened. And I realized even though I didn't want to use, the reason why I used is because I didn't know what else to do. I really didn't know what else to do. And the reason why I finally turned myself in is because by this time, institutions had become a way of life to me. In fact, you know what? I used to look forward to getting locked up, where these people would get me off of the street where life was painful for me. And they would put me in an institution, and they would put some order into my life because I didn't have the ability to do it for myself. I was institutionalized. And they sent me to this place back in Texas, which was a hospital. I had been there once before for 2.5 years, and it specialized in the treatment of drug addicts. And when I got back there, I stayed there for 6 weeks, and they determined that I was detrimental to the station. There wasn't anything they can do for me. I was a hopeless drug addict, and they sent me out of there. They sent me to a place in Leavenworth, Kansas, to finish my time. When I was in Leavenworth, I used to think about that meeting I went to. And I remembered the things that I had heard. And the thing that really impressed me more than anything else was this guy Scott, this guy that had become my sponsor. And the thing that impressed me is that this guy has been clean for 5 years. I have never known a drug addict that was clean for 5 years. And I knew a lot of doping. And I kept thinking to myself, if he can make it, maybe there's a chance for me. Maybe I can make it. And if there's anybody that can help me, it's got to be Scott. And I thought to myself, when I leave this place, I'm going to go back to LA and I'm going to see if I can find Scott. And that's exactly what I did. When I got out, I went back to LA. I looked for Scott, and I found him. And for the first time in my life since I had started using drugs, I stayed clean and sober for 6 months. I went to a meeting every night. I didn't work the program. I didn't work the steps, but I went to a meeting every night. And eventually, because I didn't work the program, I used again. And the reason why I used, I didn't know it at the time. See, but deep down inside, I still believed that if circumstances were different, if the situation was different, if I had those breaks that I had never had, if I had a job, if I had that money, if I had that nice apartment and those material things that the world says, these are the things that you need in order to be happy. If I had those things and that nice lady, maybe I could manage my life. Maybe I could even have a drink once in a while. I really believe that. I really thought that maybe it was possible. I didn't realize it at the time that what I was believing in was a lie. See, because this program is a program of rigorous honesty, which means it's a program of truth. It tells us the truth. And it tells us in the first step, if you be an addict, you are powerless over your addiction and your life is unmanageable. That's the truth. But I still believe that maybe I was different. Maybe in my case it was different. I realized that the thing that I believed in was an illusion. And I believed in that illusion. And I used again. And in 1962, in December of 1962, I kicked my last habit. And I had to go to a place because I couldn't stop on my own. I needed some help. And I went to a place in Santa Monica called Synanon. And I stayed there a very short time. I went into Synanon on December the 6th of 1962, and I left on Christmas Day. And I have to say this, you know, I'm grateful to Chet Dietrich and the people there at Synanon because, you know, during the time I was there, they took care of me, they loved me, and they made sure that I was safe. And like I said, I left there on Christmas Day of 1962. But during the time I was at Synanon, the miracle happened. The miracle happened in my life. And the miracle is that I lost the obsession to use. It left me. And I think the reason for that is because the obsession was part of that illusion that I had. The illusion that I had power. I don't have any illusions today. I know I'm powerless. I know I cannot drink, I cannot use, I cannot take any kind of chemicals. There's no way on earth that I can ever take anything again and get away with it. I don't have any illusions. And I've never had that obsession come back. And the thing I think that saved me is the power that is contained within the steps of this program. And the principle I'm referring to is the principle of honesty. See, to me, honesty means to evaluate and accept conditions as they are. And the truth is that if you be an addict, you're powerless over your addiction and your life is unmanageable. That's number one. That's number one. You know, and I was able to see it for the first time in my life. When I was at Synanon, I reached that point where I saw it. I saw it clearer than I had ever seen it before in my life. And I realized that there was no way on earth that I could ever use again and get away with it. You know, and I had been hearing it over and over. Every time I came to a meeting, I heard the truth. But I never accepted it until that day. As I said, I saw it clearer than I had ever seen it before in my life. And I believe that the reason why I wasn't able to see it is because I was insane. See, when a person is insane, what it means is that, technically speaking, he has lost contact with reality. That was me. See, basically what my problem was that my perception of myself, my perception about the world and everything and everybody in the world was so distorted that by the time I finally got to this fellowship, I didn't know the difference between what was real and what was not real. These illusions that I believed in, I believed they were real. I really thought I had power until the truth set me free. And you've heard it many times. Know the truth because the truth will set you free. Know the truth because the understanding of the truth will set you free. It will set your mind free from these illusions that are holding you down. And that's what it did to me. It freed me from these illusions. And this program is a program that is helping me to become disillusioned. Listen to the word, disillusioned. Because it's these illusions that I've had about myself all my life that have been holding me down. You know, until I finally got here, I began to realize that my self-perception determines my experiences in life. You know, if I believe in lack, I'm going to set up circumstances in my life in order to experience lack, in order to prove to my mind that what I believe is true. See, because if I experience plenty, I contradict myself. Not only that, but I invite people into my life who will agree with my opinion of myself. I didn't know that when I got here. I really didn't know that. You know? And I feel so fortunate that I finally got to this fellowship because This fellowship has the answer. It's very simple, but it's not easy. And the answer is change your opinion about yourself. That's it. And this is why I feel so very grateful and very fortunate, because it's these illusions that have been keeping me down. Most of my life, I have always had a very strong sense of lack. This is why I've always felt lonely. I've always felt empty. I've always felt worthless. I've always felt less than. I've always had that emptiness inside me. You know, we call it the hole in the gut. All my life, I've always felt that, because I've always had this strong sense of lack. And when I was a young boy, very young boy, I began to use drugs and alcohol to compensate for these feelings. You know, but as I grew, these feelings also grew. And eventually, they became so powerful that no amount of drugs and no amount of any kind of chemicals could shut those feelings off. And eventually in my life, this sense of lack became so powerful in my life that it actually became form. See, when I got here, I didn't have anything. I was on the street. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any job. My family didn't want to have anything to do with me. I had absolutely nothing. That sense of lack had finally manifested itself in form. And that's how I came to this program. Completely bankrupt in every department. You know? And I go back to that day, and during the time it was happening, I thought it was the most terrible day of my life. But as I look back, I realized that it was the most blessed thing that ever could happen to me. Because what happened was that God did for me what I didn't have sense enough to do for myself. I finally had become to the point where it was so obvious that I couldn't deny that my best methods, my best understanding, my best wisdom almost killed me. That's how slick I was. My best thinking got me here. And I finally realized that of myself, I was nothing. And at that point, I became willing. And I'm grateful I got to that point. See, because I don't believe that without the humility I had when I got here, I wouldn't be here. And it's true, I had to beat my head against that wall over and over until I finally got to the point where I had finally humbled myself in desperation. And I became willing to open my mind, and listen for direction. Because to me, that's what humility is. The willingness to accept the truth. Just the willingness. Open-mindedness. That's humility. And that's one of our basic principles. You know, we have many principles. And let me name a few. Tell you what they are to me. There's also the principle of honesty that I talked about. To evaluate and accept conditions as they are. And many times, I don't know what the facts are. But as I keep an open mind, and I try to understand, I begin to know the truth. And as I know the truth, then I have a chance. And there's also the principle of faith. You know, when I got here, I didn't have any faith in myself. I didn't have any faith in any kind of system. I had no faith in God. You know, but as I was able to see other people recover, and then I began to recover, I began to have faith. And as my time grew on the program, my faith also grew. And even today, my faith is still growing. And there's a principle of courage. That was a hard one for me, because I've been a coward all my life. I've been running all my life. And courage to me means a state of mind that will enable me to face whatever I have to face and not run, not drink, not use, not smoke any of that non-addictive weed. And there's also the principle of appreciation, or you can call it gratitude. You know, no matter how bad things seem to be, no matter how bad the situation is in my life, if I can look into my life and really be honest with myself, there's always something I can be grateful for. Even if it's a little thing. Always something to be grateful for. And also, it puts you in the now. Gratitude puts you in the right now. And the beautiful thing about the right now is that right now is the only time I can experience God in my life. I can't experience God tomorrow or yesterday. Only right now. You know. And one of my biggest problems is that all my life I've either had my mind on yesterday or tomorrow. And every time I put my mind on yesterday, you know, I always start thinking about the things I did. I start feeling ashamed of myself, and I start feeling depressed. And I start thinking about the people that hurt me and the people that I hurt, and I begin to get angry. And whenever I have my mind on tomorrow, there's no way on earth that I'm gonna be able to see it without fear. Because I don't have anything to refer to except the past. And there's also the principle of service. Service to myself, service to my God as I understand Him, and service to my fellow man. And this is why sometimes, you know, we have to give a little more than just our experience, our strength, and our hope. Sometimes we have to give a little money. Sometimes we have to open our homes and share our food. And if we have an extra shirt, give it to them. And we have a little extra money, give it to them. Because really, we're not giving them anything. What we're doing is we're sharing with them what is truly rightfully theirs. See, God made this world and everything in it for all of us. And it's our duty to share it with each other. Because it's in giving that you receive. See, giving and receiving is synonymous. It means the same thing. And this was kind of hard for me in the beginning to understand, because all my life I have always associated giving with losing. If I give you some of what I have, I would have less. And that's a lie. That's a lie. And this is why this program says, in order to keep what you have, you have to give it away. Because when I give to you, I'm really giving to myself. When I attack you, who am I attacking? I'm attacking myself. See, because in truth, there's only one of us in here. There's only one of us in here. And that one has been referred to in many, many ways. It's been referred to as the sonship, or it's been referred to as a collective unconsciousness, or it's been referred to as a Christ mind, or the Buddha mind. It means the same thing. When God created man, He only made one of us. And when God created us, He didn't make something other than Himself. What He did, He extended of Himself. He projected of Himself. He made more of Himself. He extended His mind. That's who we are. That mind that was in Jesus and in Buddha and in Muhammad is in you and I and all of us. There's only one of us. This is why when I give to you, I give to myself. When I give to the universe, I give to myself, because I am the universe. There's only one of us in here. And you know, this is why this is a program of miracles. because there's so much love in here. And the love I'm talking about is that love that is our natural inheritance. That's the love I'm talking about. And a miracle is simply a correction. That's what a miracle is, a correction. And miracles should happen naturally and spontaneously as an expression of their love. And when miracles don't happen, it's because the love has been interrupted. And the love I'm talking about is the love that flows from one heart to another heart, to another heart, to another heart, to another heart. And the thing that stops that flow of love, that natural flow of love, is our resentments, and our hatred, and our prejudice, and all our ego stuff. That's what interrupts the love. And when that happens, miracles don't happen. And this is why this program is such a beautiful thing, because we don't care who you are, what your religion is, what your color is. It doesn't matter who your connections are, or how much or how little you have. The only thing we're interested in is, what do you want to do about your problem, and how can I help you? There was a time when I would have never thought that I would ever be standing up in front of a crowd of people talking the way I'm talking. Never would I have thought that. My life began to change about 8 years after I was clean and sober. By this time, the program had been good to me. I learned how to work. I started working, and within a short time, I realized that a lot of these illusions I had about myself, that I was a dummy, that I was worthless, and I was a good for nothing, I began to understand that they were lies. Because by this time, I had my own business. I had met a woman on the program. In fact, she has a month more sobriety than I do. And I had a roofing company, and it was so prosperous, it was spitting money. And I was able to provide my family with the beautiful things in life. A nice home, new automobiles, nice clothes, good food, and everything was just... I was getting all the things that the world has always told me, if you have these things, you'll be happy. And it was at that time when I had two boys. My oldest son, Tony, and my younger son, Eric. I found out that my two sons were sick. I had two sons with a muscle disease called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. They both had it. I didn't know what it was. I had never heard of muscular dystrophy. You know, I had my head in drugs all my life. I was never awake. I was sleeping for all those years. And my wife and I told her, I can afford it. We'll get these boys to the best doctors, the best clinics, whatever they need. I can afford it. And she said, I'm going to write to the Muscular Dystrophy Association in New York and find out what we can do to help these boys. And a couple of weeks later, I got home from work, and I found my wife in the kitchen completely destroyed. And I asked her, what's the matter, honey? And she says, read this pamphlet. Well, there are several types of muscular dystrophy. Duchenne is what the children get, and it's one of the biggest killers of children. There's no cure. There's no medicine. There's nothing. What happens is these boys get weaker and weaker and weaker, and eventually they end up in a wheelchair. And pretty soon they can't feed themselves, they can't clothe themselves. You know, I have to get up at night and turn my boys over at night because they don't have the strength to do it. The small boy is in a breathing machine because the lung is a muscle. He doesn't have the strength to breathe on his own. And my oldest boy is in a wheelchair. And I didn't drink over this, and I didn't use over this. I went crazy. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't deal with it. Here I had all the things that I thought would make me happy. And I realized how powerless I was. I really saw how powerless I was. And there for a while, I thought I had done this. I had picked myself up. I began to give myself credit. I began to pat myself on the back. And I realized how small I was. And, it seems like when you're really hurting, the ones you hurt more are the ones that are closest to you. See, because these three feelings that I've had all my life, that have tormented me all my life, came back again. And the three feelings that I'm talking about is guilt, and anger, and fear. I've always felt guilty. All my life I felt guilty. And because I believed I was guilty, I would set up circumstances in my life in order to make mistakes, in order to prove to my mind that I was guilty. And the more I was guilty, the more mistakes I made. And the more mistakes I made, the more I felt guilty. And the more, it was a vicious cycle. And every time I did something wrong, it would justify this anger that I had towards myself. And then the fear would come in that I've been such a terrible person, I've got to be punished. And these are the three feelings that I've had all my life. See, but the ego mind never takes the blame for anything. It always blames people, places, and things. And so what I did is I would project this guilt and this anger and this punishment on my family. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what was happening. And so it got so bad that my family finally told me, Pepe, you're driving us crazy. You're making this place a hell for us. Why don't you just get out of here? And I moved out of my home. Because I realized that my family had enough problems to deal with without having to deal with a maniac like me. And I moved out. And I had another new house that I had bought, and I moved into that house. And the only time my family would see me was once a week. I'd come over and I'd get the bills, and I'd take the lady to go to the shopping, and I'd take care of whatever business I had to take care of, and they wouldn't see me for another week. And eventually I lost everything I had. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't think, and I lost my business. And the way I escaped was after I lost my business, I got 2 full-time jobs. I used to go to one job and work 8 hours, and I leave that job and I go to another job and work 8 hours, and by that time I get home I was so tired I didn't have time to think. I was crashed. And I did this day in, day out, day in. I did this for a year and a half. I never missed a day. I never took a vacation. I never was tardy. I just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked until finally it got so bad I wasn't making any more meetings. I wasn't associating with people on the program. And whenever I would run into these people, they'd ask me, Pepe, how are you doing? I say, I'm fine, everything's fine. How's the family? Oh, we're fine. I haven't been going to meetings a lot because I'm working a lot, but I'm fine. And I wouldn't cop out to nothing. I was a mud hole. I was in a hole in my mud. I didn't want to tell anybody that inside I was dying. See, because all my life I've always felt that if you really saw Pepe, if you really saw the Pepe that's inside, that little child that's scared to grow up, if you saw all those things inside me, you'd turn from me and run. So what I did is I set up a wall, and I would only let you in so far. And this is why all my life I was never able to build any kind of intimate relationships. Because I kept it out. I didn't know how to build any relationship. I was scared to death that if you saw me, the real me, you wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. I was a terrible, terrible person. And after a year and a half, I finally got to the point where I was very seriously thinking about taking my life. And I remembered that meeting I had gone to, my first meeting, and I remembered blank witness when he talked about he felt like he was in a deep, deep hole and he couldn't get out. And that's how I felt. I felt like one. But I made the right move. I came back to my fellowship. I came back to the meeting. What I did is, the first thing I did is I went home and I told my wife, I've got to come home. I've got to deal with the situation with the boys or I'm going to destroy myself. And I told her, look, you're not obligated to me for anything. I just want to come home and be with the boys. I have to do this for my own sanity. And she says, come on home. And I've been home ever since. And one of the first things that I did is I moved out of LA. I moved my family up to a little place in Redding, California, up by Lake Shasta. I bought a little farm up there. And for 6 years I lived up there. And I was able to, I got to meet my boys. I got to meet my family. I had never really known my family. And I used to take them camping and fishing, and I spent all my time. I haven't worked since then. I quit. My boys, that's my full-time job. And, during the time I was up there, my breakthrough came. And it was during the time I was in Redding, the Narcotics Anonymous group was having a world convention in Portland, Oregon. And they called me. And they said, Pepe, we would like you to come to Portland and be the banquet speaker. You've got a lot of time. And we'd love to have you up here. And I told them, well, I don't know. Let me talk it over with my family, and I'll get back to you. And I'll let you know within a couple of days. And when I hung up, I told my family, what am I going to say to these people? I've been nuts for a couple of years. I've almost killed myself. I can't deal with the situation with the boys. What am I going to do? And I'm out here hiding in this chicken shit little farm up there. What am I going to tell them? That I got a great program going? But my oldest son told me something that blew my mind. He says, you know what, Papa? He says, I've heard you cry. I've seen you go through some changes. I've seen you go crazy. I've seen you have a lot of problems. I've seen you that this is a real difficult thing for you to cope with. He said, but in spite of that, Papa, you're still clean. What time is it? That's what I did. I went up to Portland, Oregon, and these people. And I'm not talking about physical nakedness. That's easy. I got up there and I told him who Pepe was. I told him that I was dying inside. I was scared to death. I didn't know how the hell I was able to stay clean. But I didn't want to use. And I opened up and I let you in. And that was the beginning of my intimate relationships. And that's what I have in my life today. Very intimate relationships. I came up here from Los Angeles with my beautiful friend Pat. She's a very good friend of the family's. I have a very intimate relationship with her. It has nothing to do with the body. We're very close. We love each other very much. And this is the kind of relationships I've been able to form with men and women here in the program. Since that time, my phone hasn't stopped ringing. I'm not lonely anymore. And wherever I go, I have friends. I have many, many friends. You know, it was during that time that I decided that all I wanted to do was to be used as an instrument. Because I had heard this one time, many years ago, I had heard this beautiful lady called Mother Teresa. And she said that her job, her only job, is to distribute God's love. That's her job. Because that's the only thing that's important in this world. And I wanted to become a distributor of God's love. And I decided that that's what I want to be. I want to be an example to the fellowship. I want to learn how to walk the way I talk. Because if I don't, I'm a hypocrite. And I'm a liar. Because honesty also means consistency. That's what it means. To be consistent. If I don't walk the way I talk, what I'm really doing is I'm teaching a lie. See, because what I demonstrate in my life attests to what it is that I believe. And what I believe I teach others and myself. And I want to teach love. Because that's who I am. That's who I am. That's who I really, really am. You know, I'm invisible. I'm indestructible. I'm eternal. I'm unlimited. You know, and this may sound kind of arrogant, but it really isn't. In fact, it's a very humble statement, because what I'm saying is, this is who I am, because God made me this way. Now, it would be arrogant if I would say that I was less than that. Then I would be arrogant. And to myself, I want to be true. And this is why when I wake up in the morning, I try to remember the Pepe that God created. Because there was a master many years ago who said, do this in remembrance of me. And this is what it means. To get up in the morning and remember the Pepe that God created, not the Pepe that I created. It's not that I created, I miscreated. Because I don't have the power to create anything. And this is why this is a program of miracles, because it's the love that inspires the miracles. And there has been a change. The change has been in my perception, in my mind, in my thoughts. I don't think the way I used to think when I got here. I don't think like him. I don't live like him. I don't talk like him. And I don't even look like him. You know, this fellowship has transformed me into another person. Even my son, he tells me sometimes, he says, you know, Papa, I listen to you talk, and I listen to you talk about the things that you did before you came to this fellowship. And it's so hard for me to see you that way. I can't see it. Now you're a beautiful Papa. You know, and that's that son that has really, really inspired me. He's been a very special boy. You know, he was supposed to have died when he was 16 years old. He'll be 24 this December. There's something that he told me one time that really has inspired me. And it was one day we were sitting by the Sacramento River when we were living up in Redding, and it was just before he went into a wheelchair. And he told me something that just blew my mind. He said, Papa, I realize that this thing with Eric and myself, this disease, is something that's very difficult for you to deal with. He said, Papa, I wish you wouldn't worry, because I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. He said, you know, this thing that we call death is really not death. There's no such thing as death. He says, it's only a change of form. You know, we see it as the end, but really it's the beginning of something new. It's the beginning of another dimension of existence. See, because death is an illusion. There is no such thing as dead. In fact, right now it's as dead as we'll ever be. I'm not afraid. He said, and in fact, Papa, he said, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just as perfect as I was when my Father created me. And I couldn't understand what he was saying, and he then said something. He said, I can't say that about my earth suit. That's what he calls his body, his little earth suit. He said, it's got problems right now. He said, but whether they get fixed or not is beside the point. There's nothing wrong with me. And I realized something. I realized that this little boy was safe. And the reason why he's safe is because he believes in the thought system of the Spirit. See, there's only two thought systems in this universe. There's a thought system of fear and a thought system of love. And the thought system of fear is the thought system of the ego, the thought system that this world teaches. And there's a thought system of the Spirit, the one that this program teaches. We thereby that thought system, we are doing God's will, because God's will is God's thoughts. See, when you will something, you think something, and God's thoughts are spiritual. See, all these principles that I talked about, we call them spiritual principles, well, they are the attributes of love, because that's what God is. And when we live according to these principles, we're coming from the best within us, from the love that's within us, from the God that's within us. And we do God's will. We live God's thoughts. And this is what this program is teaching me. How to do God's will in all my affairs. My time is about up. And I want to say that, once again, this has been a privilege for me to come here and speak to you and share with you. And before I go, I would like to say something. When I get done talking, I wish everybody would stand up and turn to somebody, preferably somebody they don't know. Why don't you hug them and tell them you love them? Because that's the only thing that's real. That's the only thing that's real. That's why I came here from LA. I came here to tell you that I love you and that I want you to love me. Because without love, there's nothing worthwhile. Love is the only thing that brings life. And when we're not loving, we're not living, we're hallucinating. So with that, I want to say, I love you, God bless you, and until we meet again.